Okay, so the main thing that I want to talk about today is fat loss and why you should do it in a more aggressive manner rather than doing it in a very conservative manner where you're kind of stretching out a cut for months on end. Whether that be 3 months, 4 months, up to 6 months, people are doing cuts and they're seeing the same results that they could do if they just did a slightly more intense or even a very much more intense cut and cut their calories down lower. They could be seeing the same results as a 6 months cut. They could be doing it in 1 to 2 months. 4 to 6 weeks is a great amount of time for an aggressive cut. And if you're serious about your goals, it shouldn't be that hard to convince yourself to lock in for, you know, 4 to 6 weeks as opposed to, 24 weeks or whatever. So the main thing is a lot of people are under the belief that they're going to be losing a lot of muscle if they have too little calories. And as there is some truth to that, it is not the number of calories which is responsible for your muscle mass. So that is a very common misconception. People think that all calories are the same and you just need to be in that positive calorie balance. And you need some protein to build muscle back and whatever. Yeah, calories in, calories out. That's really something that is only applicable to fat loss and fat gain. Muscle gain, muscle loss is not about calories in, calories out. It is about a couple different things which have correlation to calories, but it is not directly calories. The first thing, which is most important, is your nitrogen balance. So this is the thing that is directly influencing how much muscle you can build or retain or even lose if you're in a positive, neutral, or negative. You'd lose muscle if you're in a negative nitrogen balance. So protein has nitrogen in it, and that is what differentiates it a lot from carbohydrates, because they're both 4 calories, but the nitrogen in protein is what will increase or decrease your nitrogen balance. To be anabolic, you must have a positive nitrogen balance. If you are in a negative nitrogen balance and you do not have enough protein, every day or every week, doesn't have to be in a 24-hour cycle that you always hit that cycle. If you do not have enough protein, you will lose muscle. If you're in a positive or neutral nitrogen balance, you will be able to gain or maintain. So no matter how deep your deficit is. The next thing, which is super important, is your carbohydrate intake and how you are performing in the gym specifically. Carbs are pretty special because carbs do a few different things. First off, they're protein sparing. So if you have enough carbs, enough glycogen in your system, in your muscles, your liver, it is going to be much harder for your muscle to get used as fuel. If you're not having enough carbs, then it is more likely that your protein is going to be used for high intensity anaerobic exercises such as running, doing sprints, lifting in the gym, and doing heavy weights, training close to failure. And another thing about carbs, you need carbs in order to perform at your peak. If you do not have enough carbs, and it doesn't have to do with calories, once again, carbs drive performance. If you do not have enough carbs in your diet and you are doing high intensity exercise, you're not going to be able to perform your maximum. So the stimulus that you get from each workout that you do, if you don't have enough carbs in you, is not going to be as high as it should be. So if you are getting weaker on your cut, it is because you do not have enough carbohydrates in your diet. It doesn't mean that you're losing muscle. So a lot of people think that when they're losing strength or they're losing some size and they're in a cut, it's probably just water. First of all, the biggest thing is glycogen. It's called the fat and flat stage. Like, you are going to think that you're just getting weaker and you're getting flatter, and it's just because they get rid of carbs in their diet, and that is not something you have to always do. When you cut really aggressively and you're carb cycling, you're going to probably run into that fat and flat stage, and that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are somebody who is purposely taking out all these carbs because you are fed the idea that carbs are making you fat and you have to cut out carbs when you want to lose body fat, that is the stupidest thing that you can do. That is straight up speed running you into getting skinny fat. So carbs and protein have very specific roles, and it doesn't have to do with the amount of calories you're having. It's just, do you have a positive nitrogen balance? Do you have enough carbs, enough glycogen in all of your muscles to perform at your peak and to give yourself a good enough stimulus to get stronger or maintain strength. Those are so important, and it has nothing to do with calories. Once again, I'm repeatedly hammering this because people do not understand it. And fat is the last micronutrient, which I haven't really talked about very much, but that is also very crucial for your hormone health. So a lot of your hormones, such as testosterone, are made from fat, made from cholesterol. You'd have a lot of problems with your hormones. You'd be low on your hormones, and that is not something you want to do. And you don't need to have a lot of fat. Fat is something where you don't need so much of it. Fat is very dense per gram. So, personally, I will have somebody, I'll say for me, I'm 155 pounds-ish. I'll probably never have more than 50 grams of fat in a day because you don't need it. If you have all of these things in the right proportions, you would be surprised at how little food you actually need to maintain muscle. That is all given in your BMR. If you eat at your BMR in the right proportion of fats, proteins, and carbs, you will lose weight so quickly. And that is the key to my aggressive cutting. We start from the bottom. We find out what is the necessary amount of protein, fat, and carb that you need. And that is how we will determine what you will be eating at. And then with a carb cycling diet, we will be having carbs maybe 2 or 3 times a week in a higher quantity. And on the days that you're not training, you'd have the higher carbs on the training days and day before training. And if it's a day that you're not training or it's not the day before, then you will just be having very low carbs because you don't really need them. Carbs should scale based on your activity level in high intensity exercise. Carbs all get stored as long as there is room for them to be stored. So if you keep hammering yourself with carbs, having so many carbs every single day, it's pretty likely that you're going to spill over and start gaining fat from carbs, which is not something you want to do. It's very hard to actually gain fat from having carbs when you are carb cycling. So you can just think of your protein, your carbs, if they're at the right level, and your fat, if they're at the right amounts, it's impossible to gain fat. And you might gain weight in the terms of gaining some glycogen, getting some water weight from the carbs that you're having on the days you're having carbs. And that is fine. It is impossible to gain fat when you are in a calorie deficit. When you have these three in balance, you are guaranteed to maintain and even build muscle, get stronger, because you don't need to be on a bulk to feel strong. You just need to have the right amount of carbs. Carbs are performance. It is not about how many calories you're having. I've heard it so many times. So if you get it right, then you will see such good progress. You will never have to do a 6-month cut. You will just start eating less, eat at the right times, eat the right things in the right proportions at the right times. And you can do it all at once. Gain muscle, lose fat super quick, and also feel good. Because you're only fueling yourself with what you need. Excess is never going to be helpful on a cut. It's never even going to be helpful on a bulk. You do not need to bulk. You do not need to get fat to put on muscle. If you can gain muscle while losing fat, why would you want to gain fat while gaining muscle? It's not a byproduct. You do not need it. So that's my spiel for today. So I hope I could provide some value, and thank you for watching.